Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Canucks Conversation. My name is David Grelli. That is Harmon Dial. Our technical producer, the man at the controls, is Grady Sass. And as I mentioned, this is Canucks Conversation. We're coming to you live from the iconic Sheraton Wall Center in downtown Vancouver. Beautiful place to do our shows. And you know, I like everybody, I like working from home. I like doing the remote shows, but there's just something about being in the studio. And yesterday, especially, you and I joked, we didn't really have much of a show plan. That was a vintage Canucks Convo episode where Faber would be busy and I wouldn't do any show prep. And then we would go in and have a great episode. We had hardly any prep for yesterday's show. And I thought it was a great episode. A lot of good riffing. It was a good time. And you just don't get that when you do them from home. So it was a good episode yesterday. And similar today, not much prep done, at least for me. I haven't done much prep for the show, but we have some good stuff. We have some good stuff on today's show. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Just watching the Wagon Canucks back at it. It's funny because outsiders will probably look at a game like that and go, the Canucks were outshot 38-26. You watch the tape back of their goals and they had some bounces, and the narrative is, the PDO train keeps rolling. And yeah, it was, to a certain extent, I can get where that comes from. But also, this is where the numbers can be a little bit misleading, because through the first period, the shots may have been relatively close, but I manually tracked the high danger chances the way you used to.
You did the Q4K chances. Let's go.
I did. And it was 10-0 for Vancouver in the first period. And I didn't even count all the goals as high danger chances, because some of them, for instance, the Ian Cole goal to open the scoring.
Anytime Jake Sanderson touches the puck, it's a high danger chance.
Jake Sanderson's not bad. I think you mean Thomas Chabot.
Is Sanderson, 2 goals went off Sanderson.
I know, but usually he's good. I like Sanderson.
Yeah, but 2 goals went off him last night is my point. But yes, the Ian Cole goal, you didn't count that as a high danger chance.
So it's like, my point is, I didn't even count all 5 goals as high danger looks, but the Canucks are just creating so much off the rush, so much off the forecheck. And the point I'm trying to make is, all right, it's 5-0. And sure, they had some bounces to result in 5 goals, but they dominated the first period. And ultimately, the Senators, they started to take over in the final 40 minutes. And the third period in particular wasn't great. But it doesn't matter if you're racking up shots and chances when you're down 5-0. Like that just makes, it makes the numbers look not as bad at the end of the night. But the game was over at the end of the first period.
Yeah, I looked at that game and okay, let's break down the game. Before we do that, I need to tell you about our presenting sponsor, because I forgot to do it. It's Wendy's Daily Faceoff Survivor Pool game. Wendy's is letting you win real food with your fantasy teams this year and Daily Faceoff. For those of you who smoke the competition, Wendy's is rewarding you with weekly prizes that will have you winning. Download the Wendy's app and score yourself 150 bonus reward points in your first order and grab a sweet victory from the mouthwatering jaws of defeat, along with some fresh, never frozen beef. Sign up to play Daily Faceoff Survivor Pool fantasy game to win weekly prizes like the spicy chicken sandwich from Wendy's and the Wendy's app. No comment on my game this week because I forgot to play it on Monday because it was New Year's Day, so I forgot to play it. I'll be back next week and I'll have updates for you. But this game, I looked at this game, Harmon, as the Canucks played a very, very strong opening 20 minutes. Like Rick Tocchet called it their best period in about a month. Hard to disagree with that. Maybe their best period of the season. You'd have to go back and, really think about every period they've played, but among their best, where you have an opponent in Ottawa who obviously is a bit of a lesser opponent. They're on the road. You're defending your home building. You had a horrible game against the Philadelphia Flyers that you're looking to bounce back from. You're looking to get off on the right foot right before you go on this long 7-game road trip. That was about as good of a start as we've seen the Canucks turn in this season. And look, it's similar to the conversation we had about, in that game against the Panthers, when they had the lead, they started to let up a lot of shots against. Yeah, they're in cruise control. Like they were just looking to lock down the win. And look, I know if you're looking to lock down a 5-0 victory or a 5-0 lead after 20 minutes, if you play the way the Canucks did in those final 40 minutes of play, there's a good chance you're blowing that 5-0 lead, which is ultimately why the conversation is shifting to that level where people are talking about, that's not a good final 40 minutes. And when I say people, I mean Rick Tocchet and JT Miller, but I don't want to dissect it too much because look, you had the lead 5-0 after the first period. And at that point, you're just playing to close it out. And look, mission accomplished in terms of keeping your guys' ice time low, right? Like that's important right before a road trip, is keeping your guys' ice time low. The one thing I'll say is that I didn't like, and I know Talkett didn't like it either, was how much post-to-post play Thatcher Demko had to have, and how many high danger chances he faced in that game, where it was, cross crease saves, and he's having to exert a lot of energy to make those saves. And look, he earned every single one of those 35 saves that he made last night. But ideally, in a game like that, you want your goaltender to work less. So that's really my only criticism about the Canucks' final 40 minutes of play. I don't know. I understand that if you're playing an opponent like, anybody in the Pacific Division, in the top half of the Pacific Division, you're probably more at risk of blowing that 5-0 lead if you play the way the Canucks did. But I'd also argue that the Canucks would probably try a little bit harder if it wasn't the Ottawa Senators trying to mount that comeback against them.
Absolutely. And my overall point was just to say that I think a lot of people outside of Vancouver, especially a lot of analysts that are sort of trying to look under the hood at this team's numbers and get a gauge of what exactly are they, that to me is just a perfect representation of, on paper, yeah, their PDO after a game like that looks high. And for those skeptics, it doesn't, like, win like that doesn't really change their mind about whether the Canucks are real or not. But given the context of how the game unfolded, the insane lead they built early, my point is just that the numbers are misleading when you go up that heavily.
These quotes from JT Miller and Rick Tocchet. We'll start with Rick Tocchet. He said, "We didn't play the right way. We take the 2 points, but it's a learning lesson for us. I did not like our 40, the final 40 minutes of play, of course. I hope our guys didn't either, but hey, we won the game, loved our first period." So that's basically my assessment of the game. Tocchet wasn't super ecstatic post-game about the way his team played, talked about the 7-game road trip and all that sort of stuff. A lot of quotes in the Stanchies as Wyatt Arndt was at the game last night. But this one from JT I really liked. He said, "I feel like we totally just sat on a 5-goal lead after the first period. Somewhere, if we're going to take steps as a team, we need to play the second and third like it's nothing. I thought that we played worse after the first period. It's nice to enjoy the win, but it's kind of been going the same all year. We're going to evaluate ourselves honestly, and we didn't play very well after the first period." Great honesty from JT Miller. And Tocchet said he hopes that his guys didn't like their final 40 minutes of play. And it sure sounds like the Canucks players didn't like the way they played in the final 40 minutes of play. And I think if you're a Canucks fan, you look at it and yeah, you just said numbers are misleading. So if you're looking at the numbers, you're probably going to say, oh, this is troublesome. But couple all of that context that you just mentioned in the opening segment here and the context of how the players and the coach felt about it, it's similar to the conversation I was having with you yesterday, Harman, about how it's not like Canucks management is looking at this team and saying, yeah, they're legit. Look at everything we've done. They're a legit team. Like, even this win, the Canucks aren't looking at it. The players and the coach aren't looking at it and saying, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We won. Of course, we're happy with that. And it's all just about raising the bar in the city and with this team. And I think that's what we're seeing right now.
They're also learning how to win, which, when you're a team that builds up a cushion in the standings, like, this core has never been in this position ever. Even in the 1 year they made the playoffs in 2019-20, they were scratching and clawing. They were sort of in that big pack, that big pile, contending for a playoff spot. They've never been in a position where they enter the Christmas break near the top of the NHL standings. They've never been in this position where they're leading the Pacific. They've probably never been in a position where you add the context of where they are in the standings with, oh, we're beating up on a bottom feeder 5-0 after the first period. So I think this is part of the growing process, the maturity, the evolution is, hey, this is a brand new situation for them to be in, because in years past, it's usually the other way around where they've dug themselves a massive hole and they're the ones trying to climb out of it.
Grady, you said we have some breaking news. Can you jump in here? You have the info we don't. I'm trying to look for it. I actually, for some reason, can't see it.
Yeah, Linus Karlsson has been called up from Abbotsford.
Okay.
So Philip DiGiuseppe, they said he'd likely be out for some time, and that's your call up for that.
Okay. I find it interesting. PDG left with what looked like a non-contact injury. So in any sport, you're always worried about that. Post-game, Tocchet said he still had to speak with the doctors, but that it looked like he'd be out for a little bit. So we will see what that means. The main thing it means is that Nils Amon, who didn't play last night, Nils Hoglander, Andrei Kuzmenko, all the guys in that conversation of, yeah, you might be the next healthy scratch. Looks like they're safe for now. But Tocchet also said, the guy who gets called up, and we now know it's Carlson, the guy who gets called up might end up playing at some point. So we'll see. Tocchet said he liked Hoglander's forechecking last night, but wasn't extremely complimentary of his game. He did say that he thought his game got better as the game went on. So I found that a little bit interesting. We'll kind of see what it means, but it's just like the way Hoglander was playing and the way he was being talked about just 2 weeks ago. It's different. It's different now. And I'm looking to see what that player is going to be able to do in St. Louis tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, there's work for him to sort of do there. And I mean, we know the Philly game. We've talked about it before. It wasn't his best in terms of the neutral zone turnovers. And even though he ended up playing, that him being the extra in practice over the holidays was intentional. It was to send a message. So for Hoglander now, he's sort of back in that mode of, okay, I can deliver secondary offense, and my speed, my ability to win battles is an asset. But there's still work to be done in terms of earning the coach's trust. It looked like he had made some headway, right? A few weeks ago, he would be out there playing late in games, defending leads, but he just wasn't able to fit on the Miller line, I think is the biggest sort of issue that's happened, because an opportunity was right there, and it's still there now with Di Giuseppe being out in terms of that left wing spot. But he hasn't been able to grab it and run with it.
Okay. Any final thoughts on the game before we move on?
Not on the game specifically.
Okay. Did you want to say anything about the road trip?
I did want to talk about the thing we prepped about.
That's right. We did a little bit of prep. That's kind of the question that arose from last night, because I saw people throwing it out there on Twitter, and I wanted to ask you it. Who are the real Canucks? Because last night, like, I don't know, I saw some people being like, well, they just won another game. They're up to 24 wins on the season. Is this them? And like, last night wasn't indicative, I don't think, of who the real Canucks are. I think it maybe added a piece of the puzzle, but I feel like that piece of the puzzle was already there, and maybe it was just a tracing, and now we actually found the piece. I don't know what I'm saying at this point, but I don't know. Like, that game didn't tell me a ton, but I feel like we have a pretty good grasp on who this team really is. So Harman, who are the real Canucks?
Well, you said you think you have a pretty good grasp.
I do. I think so.
Elaborate.
Well, I've kind of said it over the past few months. Like, they started the season so hot in October, and then they played a ton of games in November, started to get, there was all the conversation about fatigue and all this other stuff about, the November schedule being so difficult. And we kind of talked about, especially with Tocchet, we talked about how, well, good teams play through that, and good teams learn how to play tired. And you talk to Ian Cole, a guy who's been on so many playoff teams for so many years, and he was really critical of the team during that time. He said, like, we need to learn how to play tired. It's not an excuse at this point. It can't be an excuse in the NHL. So they played 500 hockey during November. Then December, the schedule lightens up, and all of a sudden they're back to playing a lot better. Then there's different issues with the power play and stuff. So they are a team, I think, that can beat bottom feeder teams with little effort, as we saw last night. And I think we knew that all season. I think we've known that. But they're also a team that I don't think yet can be considered a Stanley Cup contender. Like, they are not that elite level team yet. Maybe that's not the right word, but the upper echelon, where you have teams like the Rangers, the Bruins, the Vegas Golden Knights. I think LA is knocking on the door. LA has been very good this season, but I think they're knocking on the door. I think they're closer to being in the Canucks tier than they are being in that tier with, the defending Cup champions in Vegas, right? I still think that's where the Canucks are. I don't think they're a Cup contender, as has been thrown around a few times recently.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think they have more to prove. The one thing you have to keep in mind is they've had practically everything go right to this point for them to be in the position now where they have the best goal differential in the NHL. They're fourth best in the league in terms of point percentage. And what I mean by that is, first of all, your core players have all been healthy. right? Yes, Suter's missed some time. Yes, Soucy's missed some time, but I'm talking your actual core best players have not had any extended absences, which is not going to happen every single season, right? So you've been fortunate in that way. You also have a bunch of players scoring at career high rates that may not last, right? Like Brock Besser has been in the Rocket Richard. Race, how many seasons has he played in the league and never been at that level before?
Yeah.
Right. So he's a guy that type of elite form may not last. Sam Lafferty's close to a 20-goal, 40-point pace, which he's never been that. Dakota Joshua's already at 9 goals, which, yeah, he's breaking out, but I don't know if he's going to be that level all the time. Blueger's got 13 points in 23 games, which over an 82-game season would be a 46-point pace. He's never been that over his long NHL career. And the other aspect, too, is they haven't quite proven themselves against top teams yet. In terms of the LAs and the Vegas type opponents, which is a huge, I think, test for them over the second half. Is how are they going to look over those types of opponents? And it's a great test, not only in terms of giving this market an indication of, okay, where do they actually stand among the top teams in the West, but also it's going to be extremely consequential in terms of those are 4-point games in determining who's going to win the Pacific Division and get an easier round one matchup. So you're already kind of going to get an answer before the playoffs, if that sort of makes sense. And look, it is a really wide range in terms of trying to figure out and ballpark where the Canucks are at in terms of the best teams in the NHL. They're probably somewhere between like the 6th to 12th best, which is a really wide range. And the second half, I think, against more difficult opponents, if they run into more adversity in terms of injuries or certain guys slowing down, and of course, what they do at the deadline, those factors, I think, will determine where exactly they sort of land within that wider range I mentioned. That's at least how I'm looking at it.
I'm trying to figure out if they're as close as some people seem to think they are. Like, if we agree, basically, that they're not quite at that upper echelon because they haven't yet proved it against those top teams, if they're not quite there and they're knocking on the door, can they kick open the door by going out and getting Jake Gensel, by going out and getting Elias Lindholm? Like, does that push them to that next level? Another thing to consider, Harman, we have not yet seen Carson Soucy in the lineup while Nikita Zadorov is also there. And I think that's one thing that, like, Zadorov hasn't been a world beater by any means, but like Myers wasn't playing shutdown pair minutes until Zadorov got here, and now he is. So now you have new value in Tyler Myers to an extent. Now you're adding Carson Soucy to this defense group. And that's another question that we're going to ask later. It's kind of in the anyone else section a bit more, but like we have not yet seen this team with Carson Soucy. So it's almost like they're adding a defenseman to this team again.
But you're not going to, like, your entire blue line's not going to stay healthy over the course of the season. Like, I get what you're saying, but like inevitably it's rare both up front and on the back end. Like, that's the best case scenario of, oh, we've got this blue line right now and we're adding Carson Soucy to it. Yes, but more likely than not, somebody else is going to get banged up, and then you're going to be like, okay, well, if you know what it's like. It's like for the longest time up until now, we never got to see, Suter and Bluger both in the lineup along the centers, and now we're finally seeing it. That's the best case scenario. But as we saw with PDG just going down the other night, like and his injury doesn't really matter. But again, I just think Canucks have been fortunate there. Like, I'll give you an example. Like the Rangers, they're playing at this incredible pace, and they've had Adam Fox miss 10 games. Philip Hedl, their second line center, has missed all but 10 games. He's going through concussion issues right now. Kaapo Kakko has only played 20 games. So it's like Canucks haven't had that type of run, right? Or like the Leafs had 3 of their top 6 defensemen out of the lineup at one point. Boston had McAvoy out for 8 games, some of it because of injury, some of it because of suspension, and Grizzly, who also plays top 4 minutes, has only played 22 games, right? Like, just those are just quick examples that come to mind. They haven't had so you're saying that the Canucks aren't yet there because those elite teams
remained elite even when they lost top talent. And look, I don't think either of us are going to disagree on the fact that the Canucks might look a little different if they lost their equivalent to those players that you just mentioned.
But I'll also say this, like what when we're having this discussion of what exactly are the Canucks, it's a moving target. Like, I'm not sitting here right now saying, oh, this is definitely what they are. Like, I've given you a wide range of, okay, like my initial sort of spitballing it, back of the napkin type look at it is maybe somewhere roughly, without having done a deep dive, maybe somewhere between the 6th and the 12th best team in the league on true talent. They, like, again, what they do at the deadline, like that's, I don't know the answer to that. You mentioned like, oh, if they add another like Gensel or Lindholm type piece, like what does that do in changing the complexion and the upside of this team? I don't know the answer to that.
I'm buying in a little too much, maybe.
You also have to factor in that those teams that they're in the mix with are also going to be adding pieces at the deadline, right? So,
but that's my
everyone is going to
point.
gradually get better.
But how many pieces are there to go around, Grady? Like how many? Who's going? Like
Well,
who's Vegas going to add if the Canucks go get? I don't know.
And we
Lindholm.
live in the Gary Bettman parody world where how many teams are truly out of it? Like there's so many teams in that mushy middle. It's going to take closer to the deadline until we actually see the true sellers. Now there's a few, Chicago, San Jose types, but like, how many players on those teams are actually going to be difference makers or an upgrade at depth for those contenders? Right?
I would say there's like, and I'm just spitballing. I need to look closer, but I would say there's like 3 difference makers available up front at the deadline. Like there are 3 difference makers that the Canucks are going to want to at least be in on. And I think including Adam Henrique in that conversation is probably pushing it as well.
Yeah.
Like to make it 4, that would be kind of pushing it. But the big one for me, I've said it a few times and I'm getting more and more increasingly on it on the Elias Lindholm train. Like go get Elias Lindholm. And I'm going to answer my own question, Harman, about what are the Canucks if they go get Elias Lindholm? I think they're pushed into that upper echelon of teams. I really do. I think if you go get Elias Lindholm or whoever, like a guy who can play on Elias Pettersson's wing, that's what I'm looking for. Or a guy who can play center, as I've talked about Elias Lindholm so many times. But I look at it and I say, okay, if you can go get Elias Lindholm, you're getting a guy who can play with Elias Pettersson and theoretically make Elias Pettersson even better. A guy that was dominating at the start of the season, that we've seen dominating in years past. And again, second shout out in as many days, Tyson Cole, our guy at Canucks Army, he's working on a deep dive right now. And we were talking about the idea this morning. And the argument is that Elias Pettersson's line mates haven't just been average, they've been on the wrong side. Like they have been bad all season long. His line mates have not been enough for Elias Pettersson. And at the start of the season, he was kind of dragging them into the fight. And just lately, he hasn't gotten any help. And I think last night was a really easy night to kind of see that with your own eyes rather than diving into analytics on it. Was Elias Pettersson's looked on recently. He looked really good yesterday as well. 2 goals. Obviously, I know one of them was a big assist to Jake Sanderson there, but like Elias Pettersson looked on last night and that line didn't look good, even though he looked very, very good as an individual. I think it's becoming painfully obvious that this team needs to go get a winger for Elias Pettersson. I think it became even more clear last night.
Yeah, and it becomes really interesting because the idea of, okay, are we going to make a big push for one of these, one of the biggest names, a Lindholm or a Gensel? The thing you have to try and weigh is not just where are the Canucks at and are they a contender, but also big picture. You almost have to do, I think, a study at the history of teams that have gone out and, let's say, paid a first-round pick for
Timo Meier.
New Jersey kept Meier,
yeah.
So that's a little bit different, but paid a first-round pick for a rental.
Oh, sure. Okay, sorry. I thought you were getting at extending them once they. My apologies.
Yeah.
Continue.
And I mean, look, in some cases, the idea of chasing a rental has worked out. I mean, Vegas picked up, like Barbashev was a pure rental. They win the cup and then they extend him, right? So in some cases it has worked out, but you go back over the last 5 years and there are a lot of actual, like, legit cup contenders that gave up let's say a first, got a player back, rental, just for one playoff run, and for whatever reason it didn't work because it's so like this idea that anything can happen in the playoffs, it somewhat does apply, especially in the first 2 rounds, where think about how many kicks at the can it took a team like Tampa Bay to finally push through and win. How many kicks at the can it took Washington to finally win. How long St. Louis was consistently in the playoff picture before they finally sort of broke through. And that's where teams, like some teams have taken a different approach to, okay, we're a cup contender. What are we going to do at the deadline? Where a team like Carolina, for instance, is completely unconventional, where they don't make big deadline splashes. Colorado, when they won the cup, they did a little bit differently, where they gave up future assets, but they tried to target players that they could keep, right? Or Arturi Lehkonen, for instance, was like this middle six, energetic sort of play driver for the Canadiens. They went out and poached him. Great pro scouting job, because he's, you know, broken out. He ended up scoring 8 goals and 14 points in 20 games in a playoff run. And last season had 51 points in 64 games. They signed him and he was a pending RFA and extended him long-term, right? So it's like, is that type of opportunity, can you think outside of the box and find that type of player? Because Lehkonen's a great example in that year of people weren't talking about him as a trade deadline acquisition. Everybody was like, okay, the Avs need another winger. They need extra scoring. They're too top heavy. They went a little bit outside of the box and targeted a guy, paid a hefty price for Lehkonen, but ended up being worth it because he was a great stylistic fit and they got to keep him for multiple years. And now he's still a fixture in their top 6.
I wonder, man. I know we have to get closer to the deadline, but I saw this tweet, and we'll get to anyone else. No, actually, yeah, bring up the tweet. Yeah, thanks, Grady. This tweet from Chris Johnson, who I found out writes at The Athletic because of this tweet. He wrote this in The Athletic. He speculated that the Avs are the most logical destination for Elias Lindholm. When it comes to price, he speculated that a first-round pick and Bowen Byram should do it. Yeah, you think? A first-round pick and Bowen Byram should do it? So my point, Harman, the reason I bring this tweet up is A, I don't think the price is going to be that high, and you and I talked off air. You agree with me that the price probably isn't going to be that high for Elias Lindholm. But when you look at what the Canucks would have to give up for Elias Lindholm, I don't know, because I find it so interesting based on, well, do you think you're going to be able to extend him? Do you want to extend him? Do you want to extend Jake Gensel? Like, are you going to be able to do it? And off air, you and I were talking about the idea of shipping out Garland and Kuzmenko in the offseason, and then that's where you get your $10 million from, and you can afford basically whoever you want when it comes to the wingers. I just find that price, obviously I think it's too high. I know we're still a couple months out. Trade deadline is March 8th. I just find it interesting to start thinking about, okay, what would it actually cost for the Canucks to go get this guy? And I know it's too early.
Yeah, to me, they still have to prove a little bit more. And you also have to think about, okay, if you are going to, let's say, acquire a Gensel or a Lindholm, and the idea is, okay, we can trade for this guy and then ship, let's say, Garland and Kuzmenko out and then re-sign them. Philosophically, you're kind of changing the sort of cap structure of your team, because you would then have another player making a boatload of money.
Mm-hmm.
Plus Pettersson would then be going from 7.35 to whatever monster number he's going to make on his next deal. Philip Hronek goes from a team-friendly number, I think he's below $5 million right now, to whether it's a number that starts with 7, or Frank that really thinks that it could be a cap hit that starts with 8.
Yep.
I mean, Miller makes 8. So then all of a sudden, yeah, the cap's going to go up. So you do end up with a little bit more flexibility, but you end up with a really
OEL
top heavy
next year. The next year.
Yeah. You end up with a really top heavy cap structure.
And this was the conversation that you and I had and you were more of a guest host on the show at that time. But when it was like, well, they can't pay Bo Horvat, JT Miller, and Elias Pettersson. You're not going to lock up $8+ million in 3 centers. Like you're not going to do that. So you're right. Like, what's Elias Lindholm going to cost on the open market? Because that helps you kind of figure out your answer. And the fact that, yeah, like I said, you've got the OEL buyout in years 2025 and 2026, right? To worry about.
You also have Myers and Zadorov coming off the books, and you effectively would have to replace, 5-6 defensemen, which can be done, but it's more money that you just have to allocate.
The more we have the more we have these conversations, the more I just go back to all of the conversations that we've had about how important it is that like Tom Willander hits, right? Like the guys on their ELC come in and can actually be good, or even they're like second contracts. Like how huge is it for this team if they can walk away from Connor Garland and then Vasily Podkolzin turns into a play driving winger overnight?
But that's the thing, like see that's philosophically it's so interesting because then Garland becomes a luxury you can't afford. And like if you took out Garland from this lineup, like what would happen to the third line? I don't think that third line is anywhere close to what it is right now. And all of a sudden it changes the complexion of the team, because what's really clicking for the Canucks right now is that they have all four lines can contribute. The top six has a night off. The third and fourth lines are able to pick up the slack. But then if you're going to go out and you're going to target another big name and you're going to decide that, okay, Garland's a luxury at some point, then you're really, really top heavy. And then you end up with like the whole Leafs debate where it's like you have so many high priced forwards, and those are stars. Stars are really hard to find, but then your depth is there's constant turnover, and it's you sometimes wonder if you have enough secondary scoring and whether those third and fourth lines can be good enough for you to actually go in a deep playoff run.
Okay.
But at least now, though, they have guys like Archie Baines, hopefully Linus Karlsson here, that they have something in the farm they could potentially slot in. Now, how well will they actually do and how much of an impact remains to be seen. But we saw in past years, like there was nothing down there other than, 28-year-old, 29-year-old AHL veterans, guys like Sheldon Dries. And no disrespect to Sheldon Dries, but it's just nice to actually have organizational depth down in the minors and even down the middle with the big club. Like look at Suter and Bluger right now, how much of an impact they've had, right? Like the center depth on this team hasn't been this good probably since, 2011 heyday.
You need to draft and develop well. And speaking of which, like we were talking about Jake Gensel, like, do you remember when Jake Gensel broke into the league? This is a third round pick that was basically a nobody in the AHL. He comes up and he plays with Sidney Crosby, and now he's like this awesome winger. Like he was basically a nobody when he came up. Like I don't even know what the Canucks equivalent of that would be. Like I don't know. Like they don't even have a third round pick in Abbotsford right now, do they? Like I'm trying to think. Maybe Aiden McDonough.
Was
The Canucks.
Klimovich a third?
No, he's second round.
Second, yeah.
Yeah. Regardless, I mean, sure, Klimovich might be a fine example.
He's not going to be that.
Hey, you never know. Maybe in the rafters next to Pavel Bure. Who knows? Klimovich might, it might be the example, the comparable of like, yeah, sure, we had to walk from this guy because he was going to cost too much. But hey, here's Danila Klimovich, who we've now turned into a winger that can play with Elias Pettersson. Bad example. Bad example.
Like, that's
the equivalent of Jake Gensel is what I'm trying to say. The Canucks need to go out and get their own Jake Gensel. And I think that's what this management regime is kind of bringing from their time in Pittsburgh. Like this was the management regime with Rutherford, of course, as the president, that went and did that in Pittsburgh, right? Like that's what they did. They went out, they drafted a guy like Gensel in the third round. They had a strong development system in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and then he comes up and he's playing with Sidney Crosby. That's what this team needs.
And they had good college free agents that they hit on. And,
exactly.
They have McWard and Hirose down in the minors, and that remains to be seen how much of an impact they can make. But, it's drafting is obviously key, but if you can find some value in the margins of NCAA and European free agents, and look, that's where they found Kuzmenko, right? Guy like Linus Karlsson there too. So,
yeah, I mean, totally. You need to have that. You need to have that as an organization.
Like Karamaki, I think, is going to be a huge kind of, we always see the contract value per dollar production with the ELCs. I think, based on what we've seen this year in the SHL and the World Juniors, like he's going to step in and put him on a line with Pettersson. The amount of shots he takes too, right? Like think about right now, Kuzmenko last year, all those goals he had, he wasn't taking a lot of shots. Whereas you put a guy like Karamaki in there, he's going to be firing the puck. And Pettersson will find him in those soft spots.
With Alvin saying that they hope he starts or that he spends a year in Abbotsford, like he's going to be a really good litmus test for this development staff that we've thrown a ton of praise toward, right? Like, can they turn him into a legit top 6 NHL player, right? That's the litmus test. for this development staff is what can you do with this actual high-end talent that we're talking about as this great winger. What can you do with him if he spends some time in Abbotsford? Okay, we're gonna quickly get to this before anyone else, and it is just a quick little segment about the All-Star game. All-Star game picks. I wanted to get to it. And this segment is brought to you by our friends at Four Winds Brewing. Family owned and operated in Delta, home to the Four Winds Light Lager, a crisp, clean, and easy drinking beer. A beer for everyone, a perfect beer for before, after, or during the game or the trade deadline. Whenever you want to have one, a Four Winds Light Lager is a great beer to have on hand. Ask for Four Winds Light Lager at your local liquor store or have some delivered right to your door through the online shop at fourwindsbrewing.ca. Okay, so today's Wednesday. Tomorrow, the NHL is going to announce their pick. One player from each team is going to be selected for the All-Star game. That means 32 All-Stars are going to be picked tomorrow, and then the remaining 12 are going to be voted in by fans. And our friend, Dom Luszczyszyn, I saw him on Twitter talking about this, about how people are like, oh no, the one player from each team rule is actually really cool because I want to watch this player or I want to watch this player. And he had a great reply. He said, leave Cale Makar at home so that some guy from the Sharks gets to go. Like, think about that.
The Sharks have to pick an
think about that. Think about this, Harm.
Mikael Granlund, you are an all-star.
We are probably going to see a world where Nazem Kadri and Trevor Martin's our guy.
Blake Coleman.
Blake Coleman or Nazem Kadri are going to get picked for the All-Star game over, like, I don't know, Philip Hronek is probably more deserving than those guys. And he's like bottom of the list of who should be there in Vancouver.
Well, that's why no one takes the All-Star
exactly my next
seriously.
I was just going to say, it's gimmicky things like that. Like, you reward the best players. You want to market your league with, the national spotlight on it. Put the players that deserve to be there. Don't put the guys that are just, we play on a crappy team and we have to have equal representation. No.
No, it's
I can't
stupid.
Stand it.
It's silly. It's just you shouldn't do that. And I mean, look, like I don't know. I don't know, Harmon. I don't know if it's worth messing like. And look, I know it's crazy to talk about integrity at the All-Star game and the All-Star weekend, but it's not worth it. Like, it's not worth having Mikael Granlund there while JT Miller, Elias Pettersson potentially, Thatcher Demko, Brock Besser, and Philip Hronek all sit at home on their couches while Mikael Granlund whiffs on his 9th shot on the accuracy shooting competition. He hasn't hit one target. And then you have to realize right then and there, this guy probably shouldn't be here. Maybe he's not an all-star.
Well, it's also why, like, I would love there to, like, when you're debating players, for instance, it'd be so cool if they had done it actually by merit and you could say, like, oh, this guy's a 5-time All-Star. How are you going to debate that? But if you say that now, people are like, what? Who cares if
who's the most obscure? All-Star? And I'm asking the chat. We're going to get to anyone else soon. Who's the most obscure All-Star you can think of? Like, in recent years
John
with
Scott?
This rule. No, not John Scott. Doesn't count. John Scott is awesome. That was a great story. Also, he's your coworker. I don't know if you knew that. He's in our podcast network. But anyways.
That was a gimmick.
Yes, it was. I'm talking not one of those. Grady, your mic's on, by the way.
Jordan Eberle during the Kraken first year.
Yes. What did he put up in terms of what was his production when he
finished the season with 44 points?
That's Sam Lafferty's music.
I think I tweeted about it, complaining. Let me see.
That's ridiculous.
Oh yeah. So I tweeted this in January of 2022.
Yeah.
Jordan Eberle with 24 points in 33 games will be an All-Star. Nazem Kadri, who's 4th in the NHL with literally double the points, 48, is not an NHL All-Star.
So here's the funny thing. Kadri gets snubbed in the season he's super deserving of it, right? When he's in Colorado and putting up those crazy numbers. And now he might have a legitimate shot at it in this season when he has 26 points in 37 games. He's got 10 goals and 16 assists on the season.
Make it make sense.
And he might be the guy that the league announces tomorrow. In my opinion, do they announce the goalies tomorrow as well? Like, can goalies be the picks?
I don't know either.
I don't know how it all works.
Do you guys remember?
It should be Markstrom is my take from with Calgary. It should be Markstrom.
Yeah, probably. Do you guys remember vote for Rory Fitzpatrick? Or were you guys still in diapers?
No, I don't remember that.
Oh,
I remember hearing about
it.
it. Like, I didn't live through it. I have heard of it.
I think there was one in Buffalo too with Zegmus Girgensons.
Yes, there was
a few years ago.
I
Where
remember
it's just
that.
like fans rally to get like a random player, which
Rob Scuderi.
I have more time for that than just saying, hey, you know, Mikael Granlund, you're going, Jordan Eberle, you're in because we need someone from your crappy ass team. But it's supposed to be fun. Where's the fun in that?
I like what they're doing with the new skills competition.
Yes, I'll give them credit for that. It actually does look intriguing.
Yeah, that's going to be cool, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'm looking forward to correctly predicting Elias. It's better than the tournament. This shit.
So how many players? We should probably know this. How many players per division?
What do you mean?
Like they send, each X amount of players.
Well, there's going to be one from each team.
Okay.
Right. And then there's going to be 12
Fan
selected
votes?
after that. Yeah.
Okay.
As a vote in. Get Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes will probably be.
Send all those Canucks you just mentioned. It's McDavid. It's Draisaitl. Probably Zach Hyman. Kempe.
Hyman. You think Hyman's getting in?
Dude,
have
he's
you seen
unreal
his-
this year?
So Hyman and Draisaitl get in on the fan
Hyman's
vote?
been unreal.
I know. But
Full
if
credit to
no,
him.
listen. If you have 12 players to add total, right? How does Zach Hyman get in on the fan vote? Because I think you're gonna have all the Oilers fans voting for Draisaitl, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again,
we
none of
should
us
have
know
brought
how
this.
the fan voting actually works.
We want to complain about it anyway.
But I just think in years past, like we haven't really seen 3 from the same team, have we? Unless it's the host team, right?
Yeah. I mean, anyone on the Ducks off the no.
Well,
Sharks,
one player's gonna go off. The
I know,
Ducks,
but
that's
I'm
the
just
point.
saying on merit, not this gimmicky.
Yeah. I don't know.
Flames probably Markstrom. So then what are we at right there? We're probably close to 12.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny because on talent, you could argue that the Canucks could have like 5.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. Like send a whole lineup.
Half the Pacific team should just be Vancouver.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be, and that's the thing. If you go on merit and you go off point totals and all that sort of stuff, like they have the best goalie in the Pacific,
Easy.
and he's probably not going to go, which is fine because I know the goalies hate going to these
Aiden
events.
Hill, but he's injured and they're in a timeshare with Logan Thompson. But yes,
Yeah.
you're right.
Still don't know.
Yeah,
I still rate
Demko.
Demko
Stanley
higher
Cup
than-
champion Aiden Hill.
Yeah, put Demko
Where's he
behind that
from?
defense.
Alberni Valley? Something like that.
Team Canada starter Aiden
Oh.
Hill.
With Tristan Jarry as the backup.
Or Carter Hart.
Carter Hart would be the
David
guy.
Rittich. This one from Mr. Joker. This is great.
Yes,
David
David
Rittich made
Rittich.
the
Yeah,
All-Star
I remember
game.
that.
Did?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Okay,
Big save Dave.
let's move on to anyone else. Presented by our friends at DoorDash. It's our listeners' chance to get involved and hit us up in the YouTube live chat. And it's also our listeners' chance to get involved and hit us up in the YouTube live chat. Wait, what? 25% off and 0 delivery fees on your first order of $15 or more when you use code NATION25. That's all capital letters, NATION, and the numbers 25 for 25% off and 0 delivery fees on your first order of $15 or more on the DoorDash app. Offer valid in Canada. Subject to change. Terms do apply. Let's get some anyone else in here. What do we got? We had some earlier that I wanted to get to, and we had a lot of good ones yesterday. And I felt bad because we'd cut the segment quite short. A lot of really good interaction in the YouTube.
By
live
the
chat
way,
today.
quickly, our man Jeff Patterson, the senior writer at Canucks Army Quad, saying it's not by division this year with the player draft. It's 32 plus 12 others into 4 teams. Because remember, they're doing the
Right.
That's
selection.
right. That's right.
So
Which
there's-
I like more. I actually like
Yeah.
that more. That's cool.
Phil Kessel going to be last again. He's not even in the league.
I wonder who would be the last pick this year.
Mikael Granlund.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's got to be someone who
Like a
shouldn't
shark.
actually be the last pick.
I know.
I wonder.
Brad Marchand.
Oh yeah.
But
That's
I don't even know if he's been good. I don't think he's been good enough to get voted in this year.
He's been
okay.
solid, but
who's.
Yeah, he's got 33 points in
Pasternak.
36 games. Not good
Yeah.
enough. It's gonna be like Pasternak and
all right. I'm going to shut up and get some questions in here.
Yeah, do that. It sounded aggressive, but yeah, thanks, Grady. Appreciate it.
It's only myself.
Okay, this one. I like this from Jesse C. Rick Tockett's going to be furious if he's listening to the show. Jesse C said, "Is playing a full 60 minutes almost a unicorn in the sense that it's unrealistic to expect that for more than a couple games a season?" I wish we had Tockett on the show because I think we'd get an emphatic no right now. But you know what? I'm actually going to try and go into the coach's mind a little bit because I think if you asked Rick Tockett that question, I don't know why I think this, but I think this. I think if you asked him that question, he would say, Yeah, sure, it's fine to think that, but how you manage those other minutes when you're not at your best really matters. Like
Yeah.
those minutes where you're not playing a full 60 minutes, those 10, 20 minutes or however many minutes, what are you doing in those minutes? Are you compounding every single mistake you make? Are you making Thatcher Demko go east-west 3 times on the same play? Is that what's happening? Because that's not okay. If you're an upper echelon NHL team, that's not okay. I think what matters is what you're doing when you're not at your very best, because you're not going to be at your best for a full 60 minutes.
Exactly.
But
It doesn't
how bad are
exist.
you? How bad are you in those 10 minutes? That's what matters more, in my opinion.
And the next full 60 minutes will be the first ever full 60 minutes played. Like, that's such a hockey cliche, coach speak,
But I'd also
description.
argue that what I just described about limiting your mistakes in those 10 minutes where you're not on counts as playing a full 60 minutes. Like, I think when we hear teams like last night, when they said, yeah, we played 20 minutes of that game and we aren't happy with our final 40. Yeah, they were bad in that final 40. Like, they were compounding a lot of mistakes. They were doing a lot of things that I just said. And that's why the coach isn't happy with that. It's an interesting conversation.
They gave the Sens a glimmer of hope, right? Especially when they got that second goal. It's like, okay, they've been on their heels here. If we can get that next one, then the momentum's really changed. And I know Score Effects has a play into that. Quickly, just Andrew Christensen on YouTube had a comment on this. He said, fans and media need to chill about all the lucky bounces and poor play for 40 minutes. If the score was flipped there isn't a chance that he would be congratulating them on 40 minutes of okay play. Which
basically what Harmon said in the opening segment.
Right.
Yeah.
But also too, like, it's not just fans and media who are saying this. We heard Rick Tocchet say that. We heard JT Miller talk about it. Ian Cole. Like, you can't, and the Canucks probably got lucky last night because the Sens couldn't get a save. If that's against a better team and they jump up to that lead, like a Colorado or a Vegas or a team that has good structure but also high potent offense, like, that's where you really start to get into trouble. And I think that's where the hesitation or issues that Tocchet and some of the players have is like, they got a little lucky there because of their opponent.
But also, I'd argue that when you're playing in LA I really felt this in the Dallas game, players get up differently for those games.
Mhm.
I'm telling you that you could I remember being on the road ahead of that Dallas game, and guys are talking about it, biggest game of the year and all this that you're overhearing. You could just see a different level of focus, preparation, and intensity. And that even in a game like that, if they were to go up 5-0 against Vegas or Dallas, they're not going to sit back on their heels quite as much as they would against Ottawa.
Yeah.
And it's the case because I remember in previous seasons when the Canucks were terrible, you'd watch games and you could tell a team like Boston, for instance, would come to town. I could think of like 1 or 2 games that come to mind. And they'd be in cruise control for most of the game. They wouldn't really be playing that well. It would look like, oh, the Canucks are close. And then for like 10 minutes, they'd turn it on and just put the game to bed. And you could tell that, okay, like, this team wasn't really taking the Canucks. It's not that they were taking them lightly, but they knew that they didn't have to exert 110% for like a full, like for the entire duration of the game, which, let's be clear too, the Canucks exerted 110% in that first period to go up 5-0. The level of puck pursuit that they had, the hustle,
the forechecking.
It's everything they lacked against Philly. And then sure, okay, when you go up 5-0, would you like to be a little bit tighter, clamp down a little bit more? Sure, but
Sure.
I see the same thing from other top teams in the NHL.
Corey Anderson said this. People forget there are other pro athletes on the other side who will make plays as well. You aren't going to dominate a team for all 60 minutes. And that goes back to what, as Jesse C called it, coach brain quads, what I threw out there about what are you doing in those minutes where you're not dominating?
Right. And hockey's a sport where you have to simultaneously play offense and defense. It's not like it's baseball where you're in the field and then you go up to bat. Like, that's what makes it such a challenging game, especially with teams that can transition the puck well. Like we saw with Ottawa last night on the goals they scored, is that off the rush, like, they're dangerous, right?
Couple good comments here from Logan Van Dyke that I wanted to get to, regular listener of ours. He said, I had quads at -130 to mention baseball by now, but I didn't hit on my bet. Grady brought up baseball before I did. And then Jeremy Lee said, in Granlund's defense, he was good against the Canucks. Michael Granlund, who we threw a lot of shade at. And then Logan Van Dyke said, so he'd actually look good at the All-Star game if 5 Canucks were going. Great comment. Great comment, Logan. Thank you. Jeremy Lee, thank you as well for your guys' comments. And of course, Corey, who I brought up as well. And Sterling Wilson, also a regular listener, said, I'm about a 6-minute player in beer league, which is a great comment as well. People bringing the heat in the chat today. Okay, this is one we'll get to from Kelowna Canuck. Hey guys, listened for years, first time watching on YouTube. Kelowna Canuck, thanks for tuning in. Quick question. With so many teams needing help in goal, what would Casey DeSmith's trade value be? Could he help us acquire a top 6 winger?
No.
And
I'm
plus
also
you want to
keep him anyway. Like the trade, the benefit of what you're going to get in a trade isn't worth breaking up that tandem, and now all of a sudden you're scrambling at the backup position. You don't have a great alternative option. And I'll say this, the goalie market as a whole, I think teams are realizing that unless you have a clear-cut upper echelon starter, it's almost random the way goalies can
absolutely
perform. Like look, like Samsonov was a really good starter in the regular season last season. Now he's in the AHL. Vanacek was a perfectly competent starter last season. It looked like New Jersey had at least temporarily solved its goaltending problems. Now he's been disastrous, and Devils have goalie problems again.
Friedman had the report. I think it was the most recent Hockey Night in Canada. Might have been 2 weeks ago, but he had the report talking about the teams that are looking for goaltenders. Like, we know there are a few teams around the league looking for goaltenders, and basically his report was that the teams that have the goaltenders know that they have something that other teams want, and the prices have been absolutely ridiculous from everything that we've heard. Like, we know UC Saros is a name that gets thrown around a lot, especially over in Edmonton. What's UC Saros going to cost you to go out and acquire, right? And look, I know Casey Smith isn't quite at UC Saros level historically, but you'd have to also think that the price that the Canucks would be asking for Casey DeSmith is probably high because of what you just mentioned as well, that they probably don't want to lose Casey DeSmith. Like, they want to keep Casey DeSmith. They want to keep that tandem in check. And hey, like we've talked about it for years. What happens if you get to the playoffs and you lose Thatcher Demko? Knock on wood, right? Like, what happens then? You want to have somebody who's a pretty competent backup ready to go. And hey, no shade at Archer Seelovs, but he's definitely benefiting from another year down in the AHL. So I don't know. I agree with you, Harman. I don't think there's going to be a trade there.
And even before the playoffs, like, you need Demko rested down the stretch run here, where you're getting a tougher schedule. And they finally have, a good, solid starter goaltender, one of the best, I think, in the league. I don't know why you'd want to break that up. I'd be more intrigued. I wonder, would they look at dangling a guy like Sheelovs just because they have Tolopilo coming up? And Demko's your guy going for it now. I know he's got only a couple of years left, but you can kind of find those backups to replace. It all depends, obviously, on the trade, what's coming back. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get out of that Ian Clark contract and you want him to quit, trade
when do goalie prospects carry a lot of trade value?
Right. As we saw with DiPietro, right? Like, there's nothing really there.
Yeah. Okay. This one from Jesse C. Dollars wise, Garland basically is the top 6 forward the Canucks need for Petey. He just doesn't fit. So he's moved to strengthen the third line. And now one top 6 spot has to be cheap. That was the question from Jesse C that I don't think I fully understand the way I read it.
I think he's trying to say that because you have a $5 million player on your third line, that to compensate, like, his point being that you don't usually have a $5 million player on your third line, that do you then need a player that's under $5 million on, like, to fill in that final top 6 spot you're looking for?
Yes. Okay. And I mean, we've talked about Garland, how he makes it okay to have a Teddy Bluger and Dakota Joshua, who are cheaper players, and how he's carrying up that third line and building them up.
Yeah, like that's a great point, is you're then able to turn Bluger and Joshua, who make peanuts, into legit third line players.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder what this team's going to do at the deadline. I'm very curious. We'll see as we approach the March 8th NHL trade deadline, which falls on a Friday. No clue what we're going to do with the show that day, but we will figure it out, I'm sure. Okay, let's get to Betway and let's get out of here. Did I even put one in? Great, I didn't put one in. I'm gonna do one off the top of my head. I literally am on Betway, and I'm gonna give you one. I'm gonna give you a real good one tonight. And yeah, I think you guys might be able to guess. Have you guys looked at who's playing in the NHL tonight?
Well, have you seen the
Your
goalie
wagon
battles
ducks?
that are
My
brewing here?
wagon ducks. That's right, Armin. Okay, that's my bet of the day. My Betway bet of the day is my wagon Anaheim Ducks to defend the pond against the Toronto Maple Leafs. A $10 bet at plus 170 odds. Thought they'd be a little higher. Plus 170 odds.
Back to back.
Returns you $27 over on Betway. It must be 19 plus play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. And hey, in all seriousness, it'd be a very Toronto thing to lose to the Anaheim Ducks.
Well, look at some of the teams they've lost to this year.
That's right.
Ottawa, Columbus.
Yeah.
They get in those track meet games and they just implode. And that's why Ilya Samsonov's not in the NHL anymore.
Yeah, and my boy Lucas Dostal is starting tonight.
I like Dostal.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Have you seen the goalie matchup in the Devils and Caps game quads? Nico Dawes versus Hunter Shepard.
Who the hell is Hunter Shepard?
He was great in the AHL last year.
Yeah.
But why is Clay Stevenson not up, Harmon? Explain that one to me.
Because didn't Hershey win the Calder Cup last year?
Yeah, off the back of Clay Stevenson.
Oh, I didn't.
Against Coachella
My
Valley.
bad.
Joey
I figured Shepard had played a lot in that playoff.
Oh, he did. I was just messing with you.
Oh,
yeah.
Damn it, Quads. I was like, man,
I don't think Clay started a game in the playoffs.
Right. I was like, I swear I thought Shepard was the one that guided them to it.
Hunter Shepard made 20
I doubled
starts.
down on it too.
Yeah, Hunter Shepard made 20 starts in that playoff run.
And he said it so confidently too. You made me immediately feel like an idiot. I'm like, oh, damn.
And
learn about your Hershey goaltenders, Harm.
And then in that Ducks Leafs game, Dennis Hildeby making his Leafs debut.
Clay's got a 937 save percentage through 16 starts in the AHL. You cannot tell me he doesn't deserve a shot in the NHL.
Sure.
I don't know.
That's 1 percentage point better than his 936 save percentage with the Coquitlam Express in 2019-20.
No,
when he won the BCHL MVP.
Here we go.
I just turned off his mic there.
When he won the BCHL MVP award, best goalie, best player in the entire league, he's got a better save percentage in the AHL than he did back then. Anyways, I'm just saying.
If Quads can't get in baseball into the show, he gets into BCHL.
I get Clay Stevenson.
I'm giving you a 10-minute or the 10
minutes
10 second warning.
No, we'll close it
I'm
up
gonna
there.
turn your mic off again.
I should take that advice from my own mic.
All right, we'll close it out there. Did you guys have any parting thoughts, final thoughts on this Wednesday episode of the show?
Yeah, you talk too much baseball in BCHL.
I said the word baseball. I didn't even bring it up. Anyways, all right, we'll close it out. For my co-host, Harmon Dial, our technical producer, Grady Sass, my name is Dave Jelly. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation with Harmon and Quads every weekday at 2 p.m. Be sure to check it out on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. And if you missed it, go check it out on your favorite podcast catcher app.